There's a bottle sitting in most laundry rooms right now that a certified mold remediation company will charge you $4,000 not to know about. Not metaphorically. The actual product. The one that kills black mold at the root level, prevents it from returning for years, and costs about $3.40 at any grocery store. And the reason most people have never heard this framed that way isn't because it's complicated. It's because complication is what the industry sells. I want to be clear about what this is and what it isn't. This isn't a miracle cure. This isn't something that replaces structural repairs when you've got water damage behind your walls. If your home has a serious moisture intrusion problem, a leaking pipe, a foundation issue, a roof that's been failing for years, you need that fixed first, full stop. But the mold that grows on bathroom grout, on basement drywall, on the corner behind your washing machine, on window seals in older homes, the stuff that remediation companies quote you thousands of dollars to address, that's a chemistry problem. And chemistry has a cheap answer. The mold remediation industry grew from a regional niche service into a $10 billion annual market. And that growth didn't happen because mold got worse. It happened because fear marketing got more sophisticated. Think about the timeline. Stachybotrys, black mold, has existed in human homes for as long as humans have built homes. It's not new. What's new is the industry infrastructure built around treating it. As a hazmat event requiring professional intervention, specialized equipment, and follow-up inspections build at a recurring cadence. And look, some of that is legitimate. Severe infestations behind walls, in HVAC systems, in crawl spaces with ongoing moisture issues, those genuinely require professional assessment. Nobody's arguing otherwise. But when a homeowner finds a patch of black growth on bathroom tile or along a window frame and calls a remediation company, what happens next is almost always the same. Someone comes out with a moisture meter, a clipboard, and a camera. They show you photographs with red circles. They explain words like mycotoxin and spore count and containment protocol. And then they hand you a quote that starts at $1,200 and climbs quickly. For surface mold, on a painted wall, or tile grout. That's what makes this genuinely frustrating. Not that professionals exist, but that the framing systematically steers people away from understanding that surface mold remediation is something most homeowners can handle themselves safely and permanently for under $10 total. Here's the part of the industry pitch that goes unexamined. Remediation companies don't make money on one-time fixes. They make money on maintenance plans, annual inspections, and the subtle suggestion that mold will return unless you stay in their ecosystem. The products they use, the commercial biocides, the encapsulants, the professional-grade sprays, many of them are specifically formulated to suppress visible mold growth without addressing the conditions that allowed the mold to colonize in the first place. That's not an accident. That's a business model. In 1951, the Department of Agriculture published a study on antifungal compounds for use in agricultural storage facilities, specifically targeting mold growth on grain, on processed wood, and on building materials in high humidity environments. The study identified several low-cost mineral compounds that demonstrated near-complete inhibition of common mold species, including early identified strains of Stachybotrys. The findings were applied in industrial contexts throughout the 1950s and into the 1960s. And then the remediation industry professionalized, insurance categories were created, liability frameworks shifted, and the simple chemistry that agriculture had been using for decades quietly stopped being part of the conversation homeowners had access to. None of that chemistry disappeared. It just stopped being marketed to consumers. The same compounds are still used in commercial settings, food processing facilities, paper mills, anywhere that mold control is a routine operational cost rather than an emergency service call. The difference is that facility managers know what they're buying and why. Homeowners, by contrast, are routed toward expensive professional services for problems that industrial chemistry solved affordably 70 years ago. Here's the biology they gloss over in every remediation sales pitch. Black mold, Stachybotrys cartarum, is not invincible. It's not even particularly hardy compared to other fungal species. It grows in conditions of sustained high humidity, typically above 60% relative humidity, and it requires a cellulose-based food source, drywall paper, wood framing, grout with organic debris. It's not growing on ceramic tile because it likes tile. It's growing on the organic material lodged in the textured surface of the tile and grout. This matters because it defines exactly what an effective treatment has to do. It doesn't have to penetrate steel or concrete. It has to reach the surface layer where the fungal mycelium, the root structure of the mold, has established itself. And it has to do two things simultaneously: kill the existing colony and alter the surface chemistry enough that recolonization becomes difficult or impossible for an extended period. Modern commercial mold sprays mostly do the first thing. Bleach-based products, for instance, are genuinely effective at killing surface mold, but bleach is a poor penetrant. It reacts immediately on contact with the surface, which means the hypochlorite ions get consumed before they can reach into porous surfaces like grout or unfinished wood. You kill what's visible. The mycelium embedded in the material survives. 3 weeks later, the mold is back, and people assume the treatment failed, call the remediation company, and the cycle continues. Bleach also does nothing to alter surface conditions. pH, porosity, moisture retention, bleach leaves all of those factors unchanged. So even if you do manage to kill the existing colony completely, you've left the surface in exactly the same hospitable condition it was in before. You've evicted the tenant, but left the apartment furnished and with the welcome mat out. The compounds that actually work take a different approach at the molecular level, and understanding why requires about 30 seconds of chemistry. Genuinely simple chemistry, not the intimidating kind. Mold is a fungus. Fungi have cell walls made primarily of chitin, a structural polymer. Unlike human cells, which have flexible lipid membranes, fungal cell walls are rigid. That rigidity is both the fungus's structural strength and its vulnerability. Certain compounds, when they come into contact with chitin-based cell walls, disrupt the wall's integrity fundamentally, not by burning the surface the way bleach does, but by chemically interfering with the cell wall structure itself. The cell can't maintain its form. It dies at the cellular level rather than just at the surface. And here's the piece that changes everything for long-term prevention. Several of these compounds, once dry, leave a residue that remains chemically active on porous surfaces for an extended period. The surface isn't just clean, it's inhospitable. Mold spores land, can't establish the initial adhesion they need to begin colonizing, and the cycle doesn't restart. That's the mechanism that makes this genuinely different from what most commercial products achieve. So here's what actually works, and why it works at a level that most commercial sprays are specifically engineered not to reach. The primary compound is borax, sodium tetraborate. It's a naturally occurring mineral salt, mined in significant quantities in California and Turkey, and it's been used as a cleaning and antifungal agent for over 100 years. It is not exotic. It is not hard to find. It is sold in the laundry aisle of virtually every grocery store in the country under the name 20 Mule Team Borax, and a 4-pound box costs around $4. Borax works against mold through 2 mechanisms. First, it raises the pH of the surface it contacts. Mold thrives in slightly acidic to neutral environments, pH between 4 and 7. Borax solution has a pH of around 9 to 9.5. That alkalinity creates a hostile surface environment that persists after the solution dries, because unlike bleach, borax doesn't evaporate or break down on contact. It stays on the surface. The second mechanism is direct antifungal action. Borax disrupts fungal metabolism at a cellular level, interfering with enzyme function in a way that's lethal to fungi, but essentially harmless to humans at household concentrations. Here's the formula. 1 cup of borax, measure it, don't eyeball it, dissolved in 1 gallon of warm water. Not hot. Warm. Hot water will work, but it accelerates evaporation, and you want the solution to stay wet long enough to penetrate porous surfaces. Mix it until the borax is fully dissolved. You'll see the water go from slightly cloudy to mostly clear as the crystals dissolve. This takes about 2 minutes of stirring. For surface application, tile, painted drywall, window seals, bathroom grout, apply the solution generously with a spray bottle or a sponge. Let it sit for 15 minutes minimum. This isn't a wipe and rinse situation. The dwell time is when the antifungal action happens. If you're dealing with a heavy growth area, scrub gently with a stiff brush during the dwell time. This physically disrupts the mycelium structure while the borax is penetrating. Then wipe the surface clean with a damp cloth. Here's the critical part that most people get wrong. Do not rinse with plain water afterward. Rinsing removes the borax residue that provides long-term prevention. The surface might feel slightly gritty after it dries, and that's the borax residue doing exactly what you want it to do. Leave it. That residue is your prevention layer. It'll absorb into the surface over time without any visual trace, but it remains chemically active. For unpainted wood, basement joists, window frames, unfinished areas, the same formula applies, but increase the concentration to 1.5 cups per gallon, and apply 2 coats with a 30-minute drying period between them. Unfinished wood is more porous than painted surfaces, and the extra saturation ensures penetration into the grain where mycelium establishes its deepest roots. One note on safety. Borax is low toxicity. It's used in cosmetics and personal care products, but standard common sense applies. Gloves if you're going to be working with it for extended periods. Ventilate the space. Keep it away from small children and pets in its concentrated dry form, the same way you'd handle any cleaning product. If you're dealing with mold in an enclosed space like a small bathroom, crack a window. That's all the precaution required, for grout specifically, which is porous and tends to harbor mold in its texture even when the surface looks clean. After the borax treatment, there's a second step that locks in the results. White vinegar, Plain distilled white vinegar applied after the borax residue has dried. What people don't realize is that vinegar's acetic acid content, around 5% in standard grocery store varieties, is genuinely antifungal on its own. But combined with the borax-treated surface, it serves a different purpose. It reacts with any remaining mineral deposits on the grout surface and closes the microscopic pores slightly, making the surface less hospitable to future spore adhesion. Spray it on, let it sit 10 minutes, wipe it off. The combination of borax as the primary antifungal and vinegar as the surface sealing follow-up addresses both the active infection and the conditions that made infection possible. The total cost of this treatment for an average bathroom, $4 for a box of borax that will last you multiple treatments, and about 60 cents worth of vinegar. That's it. That's the entire material cost for what a remediation company would quote you somewhere between $1,200 and $4,000 to address. Killing the mold is step one. And honestly, it's the easy part. What keeps people in the remediation cycle is that they treat the symptom without adjusting the conditions that created it. Black mold needs two things to survive: organic material and sustained humidity. You've addressed the first one with the borax treatment. The second one is a behavioral and mechanical question, not a chemistry question, but it's where the real prevention happens. Most bathroom mold problems persist because bathroom ventilation is inadequate. The exhaust fan that exists in most bathrooms was sized for the square footage of the room, as it existed at the original construction, which may have been 40 years ago, may have been a different layout, and almost certainly used less hot water than a modern household does. The standard recommendation is that a bathroom exhaust fan should run for at least 20 minutes after a shower to fully evacuate the moisture load. Most people run it for the length of the shower and turn it off when they leave the room. That's not enough. The humidity that remains in the air after that fan shuts off condenses on cool surfaces, particularly grout lines, window seals, and the wall areas above the shower, and that's where the mold reestablishes itself, usually within 4 to 6 weeks. Two practical adjustments make a significant difference. First, leave the bathroom door open after showering when possible. It allows the warmer, wetter air to mix with the drier air in the rest of the house and reduces the condensation load. Second, if your exhaust fan is more than 10 years old, check the CFM rating on the unit against current recommendations for your room size. Replacing an undersized exhaust fan is a 2-hour project and costs $60 to $120 for a quality unit. That single mechanical fix does more to prevent mold recurrence than any spray treatment, borax, or commercial. In basements, where mold problems tend to be more stubborn, because humidity control is harder. A dehumidifier set to maintain 50% relative humidity or below is the single most effective mold prevention tool available. Not the borax treatment, not any spray, not any professional service. Humidity control is the root intervention. Everything else treats the consequence of inadequate humidity control. When a remediation company leaves your house, they hand you an invoice and a pamphlet, and that pamphlet almost always ends with "schedule your annual inspection." Think about that framing for a moment. The service model is designed to position mold as an ongoing threat that requires ongoing professional management. And in certain situations, severe structural moisture, problems, HVAC contamination, large-scale infestations, that's genuinely true. But for the vast majority of residential mold situations that drive calls to remediation companies, the honest answer is that it's a surface problem with a surface solution, and the surface solution costs less than $5. The knowledge of what actually works has been available for a long time. Borax, as an antifungal for residential use, was documented in government agricultural research in the early 1950s. Antifungal properties of acetic acid have been studied since the 1940s. None of this is cutting-edge chemistry. It's chemistry that got deprioritized as an industry built a service model around the assumption that homeowners wouldn't look it up. You now have a complete working protocol. Borax solution at 1 cup per gallon of warm water. 15-minute dwell time. No rinsing. Vinegar follow-up on porous surfaces like grout. Address the humidity source, not just the mold. These are not workarounds. They are chemically sound interventions backed by decades of antifungal research, and they perform at a level that most commercial consumer products don't approach. Because commercial consumer products are formulated to be purchased repeatedly, not to solve the problem permanently. If this kind of buried practical knowledge is useful to you, the kind of information that's technically available but rarely framed in a way that makes it actionable, there's more to uncover. Subscribe so you're notified when the next one surfaces. And if you know someone who just got a mold remediation quote that made their stomach drop, send this to them before they sign anything. They've got $4 and a Saturday morning. That might be all they need.